This episode of Just the Tip-Sters is sponsored by Clean Spa Bath and Body. That's clean with a K. Cleanspa.com. Clean Spa. Prepare to smell delicious.
From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
What's your favorite color?
This week with in-studio special guest, writer and witness Cynthia Hawkins. Remember, if you got a tip for Melissa, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. Her therapist tells her it's perfectly normal to pose her Mulder and Scully X-Files dolls into vaguely kinky sexual positions. Melissa Morgan!
More cowbell. Producer Mark, that's completely rude. My Mulder and Scully dolls have never had their clothing removed.
That's why they're vaguely kinky.
Oh, I see. Only in your mind are they kinky?
Well, you should see her, folks. She's like takes them and kind of first they start kissing.
They do.
They start making out.
Yes, they do.
But it gets a little weirder after
it does.
that.
It probably does. But
with their FBI suits on.
They have. It's very cute. It's like a Barbie and Ken, except Ken looks a little more David Duchovny-ish, and Barbie has short red hair and a bob.
Yeah.
And she has a beautiful little gray suit on, and they have insensible shoes, and they have their little FBI badges, and they're kind of spectacular, but they have never been unclothed, and
not yet anyway.
Oh, yeah, the day is young. Just stop it. Why are you you're such a hater for no reason?
I'm not a hater. I'm a celebrator of all things Melissa, including including the kinky X-Files dolls.
They're not. Oh, for goodness sake! They had stands, and I can't seem to locate them because I would love them to be standing up in the podcast room, next to my Scarface doll. Maybe
right, I forgot about
I'm thinking. I think that's a perfect place for them. I got to get some doll stands from somewhere.
Oh, it's gonna get stranger in there, man.
It's not. My imagination is not what it used to be. I'll just say that. How about that? They mostly stay clothed. They do occasionally make out, but that's about the extent of it. There's nothing else going on.
I'm kind of scared now that you got you got two matching Halloween skeleton unicorns.
Oh, yes. Well,
what you may end up doing with them.
That's actually one I purchased myself, and one I received when I was in Kentucky from my beloved school friends, Tipster Vicky and Tipster Denise. And yes, so now I have two skeletonized unicorns where you press a button and their eyes light up and they make a whinny noise like they're horses, which is, interesting.
It's disturbing. But
it's disturbing and wonderful all at the same time.
It's cute, too.
It's very cute. I came back from Kentucky with a plethora of unicornery. I have 2 pairs of unicorn socks, a light-up skeletonized unicorn, a unicorn floaty from Tipster Danelle. I'm just overwhelmed. Oh, a unicorn keychain from Tipster Lisa. I'm like unicorned out.
Wow.
I know. It's a lot. I came home with more than when I left, so that lets you know it was a successful trip when you come home with a lot of...
I'll say it was.
Well, it was an interesting one. Faux show, which we will get to a little later. This is going to be a different kind of episode. But before we get to that, I have to thank some people who left reviews. CCR Girl, which I was not sure if that means she's like a fan of Creedence Clearwater Revival, or if she's like the president of her HOA. Like, what does CCNR
it's
stand
Creedence.
for?
It's got to be Creedence.
It's Creedence.
Yeah.
What are CCNRs?
Covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
Thank you. So, yeah, I don't know if she's highly into, like, HOA jargon.
Yeah, maybe she works at a law firm that drafts CC&Rs. Yeah.
But she left a lovely review, and I have no idea of the gender of the wonderful reviewer 88621, because this wonderful reviewer mentions the 100th episode of the Carrollton bus crash, which is really close to my heart, and thought I was really taking a chance with the 100th episode being something that may be just too, I started to call it ethnocentristic, but, too localized to Northern Kentucky. But a lot of people, some California natives, in fact, have said that they learned a lot about, bus safety, and it turned out better than I thought.
Yeah, it's one of our most downloaded episodes.
Yeah, I thought it was going to kind of be a dumpster fire or something, no pun intended, but it turned out it was a much better episode than I thought it could ever be. Before producer Mark chastises me for not mentioning this, I would like to say, if you have a tip, if you have a story idea you would like us to cover, please feel free to email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. I've gotten a few show ideas, story ideas, cases that people want covered, and they haven't really given me a lot of information. They would send like a link to a story, and I'm like, do you want me to do this? And some of them are not exactly the kind of stories we would typically cover, but if you want me to, please feel free to talk to me. Explain, I'd like you to cover this one because I live near there, or I'd like you to cover this one because it's always haunted me, or...
Right, and if you leave a message, unless you don't want us to, we'll put your voice on the podcast.
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely, we can do that, but it's anonymous if you want to leave an anonymous message also. And if you would do us a solid and leave us a rating or even a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to us at this moment, we would be very grateful. The reviews that I mentioned they're priceless and precious to us. They mean a lot, and I don't know how all of the world works for sure, but apparently the more reviews you have, the easier it is for someone who may be looking for a podcast in the true crime genre to find you. So it helps people find us. It's always amusing to me when someone leaves a review that says, I just found you. I have no idea why I don't know who the fuck you are, but here's a review. And that makes us very happy because those are almost always good. So we're very grateful to any of the tipsters who can take the time to give us a 5-star rating or write a review explaining why you like the podcast, what maybe caught your ear, or what you think of it. We are happy to hear it. We are really happy to hear it. So,
and I don't chastise you much. I don't think.
I think much is it's hard to be objective about your chastisation.
All right. So anyway, give us a call, send us an email. And what are those numbers and email addresses again, Melissa?
Why, producer Mark, it's 832-TIPSTER, 832-847-7837, or jttipsters@gmail.com, or go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you are casting your pods, or pod in your casts.
Pod in your casts.
And leave us a review, and we would be very grateful. So October is going to be a little different, but before we get to sort of a rundown of what's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks, we want to mention that this episode is absolutely sponsored by our wonderful sponsor, Clean Spa by Jennifer Hardaway. And she makes beauty products with all natural ingredients, and they're all designed with deliciously unique fragrances taken from nature. As the holidays approach, Clean Spa is gearing up for its annual limited edition seasonal scents that can be infused into any of the Clean Spa products, the lotions, body washes, scrubs, moisturizers, anything. Jennifer can make anything that your imagination can dream up. But first up, just in time for October, is the Perfect Pumpkin scent with sweet notes of pumpkin pie and vanilla, but it's combined with cinnamon and clove for a fragrance that's the perfect autumn treat. Add Perfect Pumpkin or any of Clean Spa's incredible natural fragrances to your favorite Clean Spa bath and body product today by visiting cleanspa.com. And remember to enter the promo code Tip-Sters at checkout to get 15% off of your total order. That's clean with a K, cleanspa.com. Prepare to smell delicious. So that is the best part of this intro, because it's going to be a ride. So coming up in October, we have some sort of grab your sides of your seats kind of stories. We have an interview with a member of the U.S. Marshals Federal Task Force that was looking for and finally located Peter Chadwick. We will have an Australian case we'll be covering because one of the wonderful tipsters requested it, even though I was like, this is going to be a rabbit hole. And I am deeply in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you told me about that last night, and it's a deep one.
The layers of some of these cases. I guess the human journey is layered, and if something happens, if someone is missing or their life is taken, early, suddenly, the layers seem to multiply. So this young man's been missing for 5 years, and it's layered. We're going to be covering the 50th anniversary of a cold case from Cincinnati. And when I was back home in Northern Kentucky, I had the great joy of meeting a cold case detective in the Cincinnati Homicide Bureau, and she is a trip. And I look very forward to talking to her. And she is being extremely kind and open with the case file. And that's going to be a big layered episode.
Maybe we'll title that one The Trippy Detective.
She's pretty fascinating chick. I kind of can't wait to interview her. I think that's the first person in law enforcement that I approached and said, hey, someone asked me to cover this case from the area, and I hadn't even heard of it. And I know it's under your jurisdiction as a cold case detective. Could I interview you? And I couldn't get the sentence out. She's like, yes, I'll be there.
That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay. Do you need to ask anyone? No. I'm getting you everything you need. Case file? Yes, this is. And I'm like, alrighty. And she actually, I see sort of a two-parter with her. One with the cold case from Cincinnati. The anniversary is coming up in late October, the 50th anniversary of this cold case, a multiple homicide. But she also met with Samuel Little, which I didn't realize he was housed in California. I thought he was housed in Texas, but I think what happened was a Texas Ranger actually got him to confess, and he's only been convicted on, I believe, 3 homicides in California. But he has probably killed over 90 women. And he is 78 and has health issues. I don't know how much longer he has. But he's not a bad artist. And he draws from memory women that he has murdered. And all in the same manner. He was a heavy Golden Gloves, heavyweight boxer, amateur boxer. And he would knock women out with a punch, just one knockout punch to the jaw. And then he would masturbate on top of them. And if they woke up, he would strangle them and kill them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's a charmer. But he's actually, Samuel Little's a fascinating asshole that I hope we can learn some things from before he departs this plane and moves on to where hopefully it's much warmer for him, on fire. But this detective spoke with Samuel Little. She flew to California and spoke with him about some cases in Ohio. He's from Ohio originally. Ohio, Kentucky. It's amazing. He was sort of a, traveler. So I see a two-part episode with her because she's such an interesting chick. And this episode, again, a little different than what we would typically do. I was in Kentucky when I received a message from a friend, a writer. We're calling her Writer and Witness, WW, Cynthia Hawkins. And she said, I have something to tell you. And I was like, okay. And she said, I've been listening, to the podcast. I'm like, that's great. And she said, I had an experience with Lawrence Tierney. And I'm like, oh? And she said, he absolutely could have strangled Karen Kupcinet. And I was like, what?
As producer, I refer now the listeners to episode 98.
Yes, thank you so much, producer. So, yes, we covered, this was one it's interesting, the ones I think, I don't want to do this, and I have to drag myself, into doing research for it and finding out things. And typically those turn out to be the best ones. I always think this is dumb, no one's going to want to hear this, no one's interested in this, but Karen Kupcinet, her name had stuck in my head for decades because I'd worked for some producers who mentioned her, one producer in particular, John Newland, which I mentioned in episode 98. So Karen is a unsolved case, Hollywood, somewhat starlet, just beginning her career, a Hollywood starlet mystery from 1963. And there were so many other things thrown in there, almost the kitchen sink. But the JFK assassination and a mysterious phone call. If you haven't listened to that episode, you might want to do that. But she was found a few days after her death, where she had been strangled in her apartment in West Hollywood. And this fantastic story from Tipster Cynthia explains, it lends itself to a personality that may have that inside them. So we know that Lawrence Tierney was never questioned or arrested or fingered in any way in the death of a young woman from New York who he walked into her apartment and she jumped out her window. So the story goes. So he was never really attached to that, but he was there, and he was not, officially attached to Karen Kupcinet's murder. I don't think he was even questioned. I don't know for sure. It's been so long now. But I know the rumors because of some of the rumors that John Newland told me. And then when I heard this story from Tipster Cynthia, I thought, I think this might need to be told. And I hope you'll listen carefully and pay attention when people do weird shit. It's good to remember it. So I hope you'll enjoy this interview with Tipster Cynthia and pay attention to what she says about her interesting experience with Lawrence Tierney. So sometimes your life totally crashes into what you do as your passion, and I love doing this podcast. And imagine my surprise when a writer and witness that I know, Cynthia, messaged me to say, I have a story to tell you. And I'm always up for hearing stories, but you could have knocked me over with a feather, a slight breeze. I probably could have just fallen over on my own when I read the story that Cynthia told me, because it was just never going where I thought it was going to go. So we know that in 1963, a few days before the JFK assassination, Karen Kupcinet, a young actress in Los Angeles, was murdered in her West Hollywood apartment, and she was strangled. And I felt a little like a nosy busybody when I mentioned in the original, I think it was episode 98 in the original episode, about a connection I may have, I heard about that may or may not, I felt like it was hearsay. I felt like I was doing something a little shitty because no one was alive to corroborate it. The person who told me passed away. The person it was about had passed away. And I felt a little shitty, but it was, I labeled it as far as I could hearsay. However, this isn't hearsay. This is first-hand knowledge. So our guest, Cynthia, who is a writer, and we're calling her a writer and a witness, had a story that pretty much knocked my socks off. And I don't even know that I need to give it an introduction because she, as a writer, is an exceptional storyteller. So I think I'm just going to let our guest, Cynthia, explain what happened to her.
Well, this actually took place in West Hollywood.
Wow.
In the late 80s, I was dating an artist, and he had a best friend who is a movie writer and does a lot of DVD commentary. He's a historian. And he would have these wonderful soirees every quarter. And he had this lovely apartment. And right on the west edge of West Hollywood. And this would have been fall of 1987.
Wow.
And so we would go every quarter to these parties. And these parties, they were always lots of fun. We'd bring some food with us. And there would be a lot of industry people, but they weren't mainstream established industry people. They were people who worked regularly, but always maybe on the genre end of things. They were writers, actors, directors, a lot of them of horror movies. Mm-hmm. And so, and I will tell you some names who were there.
Oh.
You could go to this party and run into people like Edgar Ulmer, who directed Boris Karloff in The Black Cat. Or you could meet Martine Beswick, who was twice a James Bond girl.
Ah.
You might remember her from Russia with Love, when she was in that little gypsy girl fight. She was one of the two gypsies.
I didn't know there were
any women
of two Bond girls.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, and Maud Adams is the other one.
That was in two?
Yeah, she was Octopussy, and then she was before that she was just a generic Bond girl.
Right.
And so you could meet Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho there. You could meet, probably one of the weirdest encounters I had there was Cornell Wilde, who was trying to sign an autograph, and he had a piece of cake in his hand, and I was standing next to him, and he was trying to figure out a way to put the cake down, and so I stepped up and I said, "I'll hold that for you," and he turned on me. He's wearing a cape. And he goes, "You will not." Oh, okay.
All right.
Just, I'm not trying to steal your cake, but okay. So we would run into some really, really cool people at these parties. Great people like Reggie Nalder, who was the vampire in the TV movie of Salem's Lot.
Oh, wow, yeah.
A lot of character actors like that.
It was like a true salon. It was really a salon
of scary movie actors. So this character that I ran into wasn't quite in that genre. But anyway, one night in fall of 87, my boyfriend and I came in, and we just arrived, and the host ushered us into the main room. There were a bunch of people sitting around, an older man whom I couldn't see because he had his back to me. He was on a sofa. And I turned to the host and asked him about his cat, because the cat was always the star of the parties. Everybody loved the cat. So I asked him how the cat was doing. And once I said that, the old man, at the top of his voice, announced, "Who the hell is talking about pussy?"
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so I thought, okay, hold still. This is going somewhere you didn't expect.
God.
And this man stands up. Before I even see him, he's a mountain.
Yes, he is.
He is huge.
Yeah.
And he stands up and he turns around. He looks like he's in his late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And he marches over to me. We haven't been introduced. And he grabbed me. And he turned me around. and put me in a headlock. He had my throat in the crook of his arm.
Oh, God.
He had arms like an orangutan.
Ham hocks?
So strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, ham hocks. They were beefy. He was a beefy guy. Barrel-chested. And I was sort of shocked. I hadn't been introduced, and he had his hands all over me. And like most girls, I think, I froze.
Yeah.
It's like, don't do anything to make this worse, and just wait and see what happens so that you can figure out how to get out of it.
Right.
Because people were laughing.
Right.
And my boyfriend, who had many virtues, but sticking up for me wasn't one of them. He's just standing there, and this man's got me in this headlock, and he's squeezing, and it's so tight, and I couldn't breathe. And I thought, holy cow, this guy could kill me if he wanted to.
Right.
And I was really, I wasn't scared, but I was shut down.
Sure.
And then finally, I couldn't catch my breath, but finally,
Wow.
he let me go.
Wow.
Whirled me around, planted a huge wet one on my forehead, and said, "Hey, I'm Larry. Nice to meet ya."
Wow.
And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, who is this? And the host said, "This is Lawrence Tierney."
Wow. I don't have any hair on my arms, but my hair on my arms is standing up.
Yeah, it stood up on my arms too, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I was instantly inclined to stay away from him for the rest of the evening, but I said hello to him. He had just had a bit of a boost in his career because they just released a comeback movie called Tough Guys Don't Dance with Ryan O'Neal.
Absolutely.
And Tierney played his father.
He did, yep.
And so Tierney was enjoying getting invited to parties.
Ah.
And yeah, he was a heavy drinker.
Oh, yeah.
That's what he's known for.
Absolutely.
And I was aware who he was once we were introduced.
Once you saw him where his face was, across from your face as opposed to where he's attacking you from behind.
Once and it's like, oh, I recognize that photo from the trades. Okay, because I worked in the studio system.
Right.
And I realized, well, this man had been a matinee idol 40 years ago.
Exactly.
And in his day, very, very handsome.
Yeah, I think an interesting bad boy look, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. Kind of a rough around the edges. To me, it was interesting that he played a lot of boxers, and that seems like a perfect role for him. And I know he felt like he was typecast. And he said he hated all of these dark, evil roles, but there obviously was a little something inside there that he related to. Because this story, when you told me, my jaw dropped and I was out of town, and I was like, how do I get her to tell me this story and we can record it, because it's too good of a story to not tell. I'm very sorry it happened to you, but it is, I'm not an attorney, but if there was a case against him, this would lend itself to his past behavior.
Well, it definitely enhanced his lore, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I was okay afterwards. I stuck close to my helpful boyfriend and the host, and I just didn't go near him again. And I figured it wasn't personal. I had just mentioned the wrong breed of animal in front of him.
How dare you to ask about a cat? How dare you?
One of my friends runs a very prominent film noir festival, and he knew him personally. And now, when he introduces me to others, he said, "Oh, and by the way, Cynthia had a very special relationship with Larry Tierney," which always makes me kind of cringe.
Right.
And do you think?
And it's also interesting that apparently on the set of Reservoir Dogs, Tierney Quentin Tarantino nearly came to blows.
Yeah, they did.
They almost had a fist fight.
They
on the
did.
set.
They were separated. Tierney took a swing at Quentin first, and he was complaining about the temperature in the warehouse that they did a lot of filming and how hot it was, and blah blah blah. And Quentin, to his credit, really, because I would imagine he could have a bit of a temper too. And it's his very first film he's directing and that he'd written, and he, got produced in some, meeting with Harvey Keitel at a barbecue. That's how he got it, He got everyone attached. He backed away from, he walked away from Lawrence Tierney so that he didn't, I'm sure I'm going to say just out of respect, maybe I'm reading Quentin Tarantino's mind, but I know he had such respect for, older actors and always gave them shots in his films. But yeah, he walked away. And then when Lawrence Tierney realized that he couldn't take out his aggressions on Quentin, he apparently picked another actor to take his aggressions out on. And Quentin finally stepped in and said, look, back off of him too. And from then on, apparently, Larry kept his, P's and Q's to himself. But he, one of my favorite things and lends itself to what you're talking about is this reviewer who said, I don't know if it was in a wrap up of his life, but it was in the mid 2000s. And David Scher, I think his name is, from New York Times, said, Lawrence Tierney is more of a force of nature than an actor. And I thought, I bet Cynthia would agree.
He's definitely a presence. I mean,
yeah.
There's no question when he stood up, he dominated the room.
I bet.
I did
it's
not
like 6'2".
I did not expect, when I saw how old he was from behind, I didn't expect when he stood up that he was going to be
a mountain.
He would be one of the 7 peaks that you climb.
Well, his agent or manager said I was bailing him out of jail, and he was 75, and he was still the toughest guy in the bar.
Yeah, the man was solid testosterone.
Yeah.
So when I heard your podcast number 98, I'm driving home, and when Tierney's name came up, that's when my jaw dropped.
Wow.
Because my first thought was, but of course he had the ability to do it. He had the raw strength, and that was 20 years earlier. Right.
Oh, yeah. When he was in his 60s, so when he was in his 30s or something in 1963, he could, probably not have an issue with Karen Kupcinet. Wasn't a large person. She was, a small to medium girl, even though she worried about her weight in the Hollywood stardom system. But, I bet he could easily, dispatch of her. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but that's exactly what all I could think of. And the man who told me, Larry killed that girl, was a 6'4" John Newland, who was a big fella, and yet he was scared of Lawrence Tierney.
Well, how did he connect Tierney to her death? Do you know?
They were in a bar, and they were talking, and someone else brought up Karen Kupcinet's death, and Larry started to get agitated. And John Newland was really smart guy. He was he had his flaws. He was kind of a I think I described him as a vagina hound. So he loved, talking about chicks or talking with chicks, whatever. But he said they were in a bar one night and someone mentioned Karen Kupcinet, because he said to me, it's like, oh, you're from the Cincinnati area. Do you know Irv Kupcinet? No. And he was from Chicago. I was like, we were a couple generations apart. I was in my 20s and he was in his 70s, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I think I was mentioning Reservoir Dogs. And he said, I was in a bar once. He said that he killed that girl, and I'm like, what girl? And he goes, Karen Kupcinet. Do you know Karen Kupcinet? I'm like, no, I don't know that name. And it was such a unique name, I held on to it. But he said that they were in a bar and someone began discussing Karen, and Larry got very agitated and got very upset. And John said he confronted him. He said that, everyone had a snootful. And he said, Larry, did you kill that girl? And he said he turned and looked at him like with, black eyes of death. Mm-hmm. And he said, I said, what did you do? And he goes, I left. So even he was, intimidated. And he was bigger than Lawrence. He was thin, But he was tall. But Lawrence Tierney, intimidated him and scared the poo out of him.
Yeah, that was definitely the effect that Lawrence Tierney. As long as he stayed seated, you could feel
you felt like you were safe. Oh my God!
And I think it's very telling that when that happened at that party, nobody did anything.
Yeah, that is telling.
Part of it may have been because clearly Tierney was the alpha male in the room, and secondly, because it was a party.
Right.
I think people think it's funny.
You'd said that people thought his behavior at first was funny and you were struggling to breathe. And obviously there are many incidents of things like that happening where people don't understand the gravity of what is actually happening.
No, they think it's a joke.
Right.
Well, they want to tell themselves it's a joke.
Maybe that's a coping mechanism.
Yes,
for your brain. Yeah.
Precisely, because, it's completely out of context that she's talking about a cat. He says something arguably funny about, about cats, shall we say. And then he gets up and completely, it's a non sequitur to then grab Cynthia by the neck and almost kill her.
Yeah.
I mean,
hold her for 15 seconds is a very long time to not be able to breathe.
And you're sitting
That's a
there,
really long time.
You're sitting there in a party. It has to be a coping mechanism, because otherwise, I think the
party would end.
Yeah. Somebody would jump up and say, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Right.
I think if I had struggled, maybe somebody would have noticed.
But you were shocked. Yeah, well, how do you behave when you're shocked?
Yeah, well, and in my case, I was a bullied child. And when you're a bullied child in school, you kind of learn that everybody thinks that what's happening to you is funny. Oh. And the adults don't notice or they don't care. Mm. And so I coped by learning to hold still until the danger passed. And so that is my survival mechanism. Wow. Well, it was. It's not anymore.
Right.
Now I'd kick him in the nads.
Right. But yeah. Larry'd have some immense pain and potentially a visit to his urologist if Cynthia of today was taken from behind surprisedly. It wouldn't happen anymore. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly memorable.
I can't believe that it took me until probably my 40s to understand it isn't just fight or flight. It's fight, flight, or freeze. I did not know that until taking a lot of yoga classes on anatomy and the central nervous system and what yoga does for the central nervous system. So it never dawned on me the freeze. And that's just as strong of a coping mechanism as fight or flight. It's really, I just didn't understand how important freeze is. But that's the way a lot of, people who know they're in danger, people, animals, sentient beings know when they're in danger. This is how they, cope, how they know to get out of it, is to freeze. I'm really sorry that happened to you, but I'm, in one way I'm going to say I'm grateful that you have this firsthand story for the podcast, because I can't help but think that this just really shows you who Lawrence Tierney was. Maybe it sounded like in the early 60s in the Hollywood system, if you're under contract with a certain studio, everyone kind of palled around together, and it sounds a little like what I called Mark's high school and college friends, the big chill on acid, where everybody got together and fucked everyone else. It was like a weird group of friends. Not all men, just in case you're wondering, it's men and women. But it sounds like, the young Hollywood system in the 60s, they were going, out to Palm Springs for the weekend and coming back, and, groups of 4 or 6, maybe, and they all kind of stopped by each other's apartments, like for no reason, just like stop by. Nowadays, you can't get to anyone's apartment. There's either a gate or, you don't just stop by. It's not like in the South. You don't leave your door open and your neighbors don't just walk in. You have to know the passcode, and you have to pass the Ring video doorbell, and you got to leave a retinal scan or whatever. But maybe Lawrence Tierney just dropped by Karen's apartment. And, she was watching TV, drinking coffee, and who knows what happened. Maybe something just got out of hand. I'm not giving him any excuse, and I have no idea if he was even there. I'm just saying a possibility. But we do know her hyoid bone was broken.
That's what bothered me.
Yes.
When you mentioned that, because I started feeling my throat when I heard that. And that was the thing that scared me, was I thought he was going to crush the front of my throat.
Absolutely.
Well, none of it proves that he ever hurt her.
Right.
Or anyone. All it proves is that he certainly had the means to do it.
He had the means to do it, and the
personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a volatility there. And he was drinking at that party.
Yes.
Everybody was, except me, because I don't drink.
Right.
But, and so that also can contribute to people kind of fobbing it off as just a cute thing that happened at a party.
Well, his behavior when drinking apparently was monstrous. I mean, I read the list of, 6 arrests in Los Angeles, several arrests in New York. He was stabbed at one bar.
Good Lord.
Yeah, he was stabbed in a bar in Manhattan. He punched a law student, a New York law student, in the jaw, broke his jaw. He hit police officers while he was being arrested for drunk and disorderly. So none of this is shocking, and yet it's still a shocking story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't want to believe that he would have the capacity to kill someone, much less kill someone so vulnerable physically.
Right. Yeah, she was absolutely smaller than him, as, you were. And I don't know I guess it isn't just women. I guess he's had an anger issue with women and men, but the Karen Kupcinet story is so horrifying, as so many unsolved murders are. But the other story that bothered me so badly was the young girl she was 22, jumped out her window when he walked in the door.
Right.
Did she jump to get away from him? Did she jump having no connection to him at all, just other than he was coming over for a tryst? I mean, that, and to know that he was never a suspect and never questioned. Never questioned. Yeah, man, I don't know what happened. I just walked in the door. A man who's somehow close to 2 young women who are no longer alive. I guess I'm just going to say I'm really grateful that Cynthia is here today, because it would have been a pretty, big public thing if he had ended your life at a party. But, I think what you're saying is this has stuck with you. It wasn't just like a weird little thing that happened at a party a couple of decades ago. This stuck with you because, you were acutely aware at the time that it could have been much worse than it was.
Well, at least instinctually, I thought so.
Yeah.
What was also odd was how avuncular he turned right away when he kissed me on the forehead, because he didn't try to kiss my mouth.
Right. I thought maybe it's because you're petite, like because he was so tall.
Yeah.
Maybe he couldn't reach your mouth.
I'm 5'4". Yeah. So, I was...
You're almost a foot.
I'm almost a foot under him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also the way because he grabbed the side of my head to pull it to his mouth.
Wow.
And there was something about it that was sort of like, I'm not going to hurt you, see? And
you felt like that was maybe his way of like, I'll kiss it and make it better after I tried to choke you? Yeah.
And that, it also gave me a way to gracefully move away from it without embarrassing myself at this affair. And, I'm glad that, like Reggie Nalder didn't try to do that too.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that really got to me also was when you mentioned Lawrence Tierney, and then you said, and he looks like Lawrence Singleton, because I thought the same thing.
Oh, you too.
And then, I went and I looked up it, and I put 3 pictures together with Jerry D'Angelo, and it's shocking how much the 3 of them
Joseph D'Angelo.
Joseph,
yeah,
sorry.
No, you're right.
I keep wanting to call him Jerry.
Yeah, he looks more like a Jerry than a Joe.
But
you were absolutely right. I had not thought that. Wow, that's true.
It's creepy as hell.
It is. That is really... I mean, Lawrence Singleton, when he doesn't have his teeth in, looks a lot like what you imagine Popeye looks like.
Very
but when he has his
Popeye.
teeth, an ugly bloated Popeye, but he has one eye keep shut, and but when he has his teeth in, he looks. And Lawrence Tierney had very hooded lids.
Yes.
And also Joseph James D'Angelo. It's a hooded lid thing, and the two of them, and then Lawrence Singleton. Holy cow, that's fascinating.
And I remember the day that Mary Vincent was found.
Yeah,
because I was in my dormitory room in college. I always got my news on the radio. It's late at night. I'm alone in my room, and they suddenly start describing this young woman that they found. And my first thought was, the people who saw her in their headlights must have been terrified.
Well, the first car passed her.
Yeah.
They thought it was a prank.
And in fact, I wrote a letter to George Duke Machen, the governor, when he decided to keep Singleton on the prison grounds for another couple of years. And I told him, I said, that was the best decision you could have made.
Yeah, and I think that pissed him off enough to where he moved back to Florida, where he was from, and then he ended up, of course, killing a sex worker and finally being convicted because, the horrible cases that have to happen before laws are changed or, perpetrators get a longer sentence. So he didn't succeed in killing her, but he sure did, I'm not going to say he killed her spirit because she is such a strong soul, but he, killed a part of her, whether it's her innocence or, her feeling of safety. He killed something.
Certainly her expectation of where her life was going to go.
Yeah, as a dancer. Yeah,
exactly at that age.
You're right.
And I consider her remarkable. In fact,
absolutely.
I thought your handling of that particular case was very beautiful.
Well, I appreciate that because
most compassionate.
I have to tell you, I thought I was doing such a great thing by having Survivor Month in August. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I thought it would bring such a sense of closure and not that there is such a word, but closure and peace that these people survived. And about the middle of the month, I said to Mark, this is killing me. This is really hard. And producer Mark said, well, you know why? Because when people die, we don't hear from their own voices the terror and what they went through. But when they survive, we hear all the horrible details. And I thought, shit, I went about this the exact wrong way, thinking it was going to be somehow, calming and peaceful. And it was just like, oh.
Well, but it did. I think it does provide a level of hope that you can survive. There are survivors, and
right.
and that
right.
survive. What it takes to survive is
sometimes.
Well, sometimes, but it is. But it's not just luck. There is something about a survivor, and the attitude in surviving. Something like that is it's bigger than yourself, and it's kind of amazing to hear that. I mean, Mary Vincent's story to me was very inspirational because
absolutely
right.
But what she went through, I can't. What she went through after what Lawrence Singleton did to her is also just tears at my heart. You want when someone goes through something as terrible as that, you want everything else to be, sunshine and rainbows for them, and it's just not, because that's not the human. The human journey. But it listening to, the survivor stories, researching them, I didn't even get it for quite a few weeks that it was bringing me the fuck down. I was like, oh, this is terrible. I can't take it anymore. But I did try to hold on to what you're saying, producer Mark, that the stories of the survivors do give us hope. And, I don't know if there's any other parts of your experience you wanted to tell us, Cynthia, but we're really grateful that you could tell us this part, because I think it's such a fascinating piece of information, and if I were an attorney, I would call you into court right away just to say,
oh dear.
No, as a special witness.
Yeah, I could wear a little black veil over my face.
Yeah, my God, that's perfect. A fascinator and a little black veil.
I have a nice fascinator.
I know, I've seen the picture.
With the toy fox?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I was thinking like it had a feather. But yeah, you're right. No, I remember you do have a couple of great pieces of headwear that'd be perfect for court when you come in as a special witness.
Yeah. Well, this another thing that I enjoy listening to just the Tip-Sters, because I've learned from listening to crime podcasts, especially this one, how oftentimes our laws, just here in California, are done basically out of reaction to something.
Right.
Rather than a longer-term plan.
Yes.
So it's an education as a citizen to understand how the process works.
That's a beautiful point, and I thank you for bringing that up, Cynthia, because I, in my head daily, go over and over things and think, why would that suffice as a sentence? How does anyone think that is fair? How can we do something about this? So what you're saying is really important, and I'm really glad you're a tipster, a really special tipster, an in-studio tipster with a great story. So thank you for being here, Cynthia.
Thank you.
So we really want to thank tipster Cynthia for letting us know about her experience, and I was worried that it would re-traumatize her. I kept saying, are you sure you want to tell this story on the podcast? Because I don't want you to go over, again, things that may have, that have brought up bad feelings, bad things in your mind and your emotions. And she was like, nah, not at all. And she's right. I mean, I know part of her journey, and she's gone through a lot of tough things. And this was probably filed, in a back file, not so much up front anymore. But we're really grateful that she took the time to tell us about her experience, because I can't help but be so drawn in when she told me what had happened. I mean, where I just don't think you get the opportunity to speak to someone about another person firsthand, something that happened to them that could, lend itself to explaining what may have happened to people in his life, or may not. It's difficult to accuse someone who is no longer with us, but sometimes you go on past history and the number of, altercations, the drinking that, I'm not giving him any excuses for what he may have or may not have done, but I think it's still a really fascinating story, and we were really blessed to have tipster Cynthia trust us with her story. And more cowbell.
Remember, if you want to become a patron of the podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipster.